What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. We'll continue this conversation regarding the complete history of boxing. On the night of November 11th, 1900, Harry Forbes becomes the bantamweight champion when he knocks out Dan Duffy in 2 rounds. The contest took place in St. Louis, Missouri. The much anticipated spectators would not be disappointed because both men would throw hands with conviction. On November 15th of that year, heavyweight James A. Jeffries was held to a 20-round draw by Gus Rulin. But in 1897, Jeffries would defend his heavyweight championship title when Gus Rulin would quit in the corner, didn't come out for the 5th round. The contest took place in San Francisco, California. November 4th, K.O. Brown was born. His name was Hale Kendall Brown. He was a black light heavyweight who was born in Detroit, Michigan. He would go many rounds with the Brown Bomber Joe Louis in the amateurs. They would learn the tricks of their trade in Brewster Center. And we will talk more about K.O. Brown as this series continues. November 28th, featherweight Young Corbett II knocks out featherweight champion Terry McGovern in 2 rounds. And that was some contest because both men would give it everything they had. On December 18th of 1902, world welterweight champion Rube Ferns was KO'd in 5 rounds that was scheduled for 20 rounds. The referee was Eddie McBride, and he stopped about 2 minutes and 50 seconds of the 5th round. Now, the Baltimore Demon, Joe Walcott, would pound Rube Ferns' body and head until the referee decided he could no longer let this bout continue. He realized it was a no contest. Rube Ferns was outmatched, and his intention was to stop the contest. But unfortunately for Rube Ferns, the Barbados Demon, Joe Walcott, was sneaking one left hook that would turn the lights out of Rube Ferns. The contest took place at the International Athletic Club in Fort Earn. On July 25th, 1902, heavyweight James J. Jeffries would knock out Bob Fitzsimmons, who was Ruby Rob, in 18 rounds. He stopped him in 8 rounds under the California sun. The new champion, James A. Jeffries, who weighed 219 pounds. Bob Fitzsimmons weighed 72 pounds. The referee was Ed Graney, and he'd seen enough, and he decided to stop the contest. He had sympathy for Bob Fitzsimmons. Bob Fitzsimmons was a middleweight champion when he would defeat Denon Perel, Jack Dempsey. And then he would jump up to the heavyweight division and challenge Gentleman Jim Corbett in Carson City, stopping him with the famous solar plexus punch. But then he would lose his heavyweight championship title when he was stopped by James J. Jeffries. But then he would move down to the light heavyweight division that was newly developed in 1903, defeating George Gardner. Referee Ed Graney had sympathy for Bob Fitzsimmons, who, by the way, my opinion, was an outstanding fighter. February 22nd, Terry McGovern defeats Dave Sullivan in 15 rounds. May 12th, Baltimore's lightweight Old Master Joe Gans knocks out champion Frank Earn 1 minute and 40 seconds of the 1st round. Now, the referee Charlie White would watch closely as Joe Gans would bang to the body and head of Frank Earn. He would witness the blood splurt from the nostrils like a water faucet of Frank Earn. The contest took place at Fort Earn in Canada. The final body blow had caused Frank Earn to land on his stomach, his face pounding into the brown dirt, and instantaneously would turn red. On Thursday, January 23rd, bantamweight Harry Forbes would knock out Danny Daughtry in St. Louis, Missouri, stopped him in 4 rounds. The contest would take place at the West End Athletic Club in St. Louis, Missouri. You see, May 1st, bantamweight Harry Forbes would draw with Johnny Reagan in 20 rounds. St. Louis, Missouri, and the referee was George Siegel. As we go through these matches, you can see consistent bouts being taken place. Championship fights all across the board, such as June 24th, middleweight champion Tommy Ryan of Redwood, New York, knocks out Johnny Gorman of Long Island, New York. Both men were from New York. It was somewhat of a Subway Series, if you will. The referee was Charlie White, and he counts Gorman out in 3 rounds that was scheduled for 20. The contest took place at the National Sporting Club at the Covent Garden in London, United Kingdom. August 18th of 1902, George Gardner was knocked out by Jack Root. He knocked out Jack Root in 17 rounds, The bout took place at the Salt Lake City. And Jack Root of Chicago stood 5 foot 10 inches. He had 73-inch reach, and he went down 3 times in round 17 alone. Now, Jack Root would later on complain, and he would claim that he injured his hand in the 2nd round, broke it, if you will. But the middleweight Root would move up from the middleweight to the light heavyweight division, and he would lose his first light heavyweight opportunity to George Gardner. Share a short story with you. Lou Houseman was a sports writer from Chicago. He would have a part-time promoter's gig on the side. And he saw a young man who was a middleweight named Jack Root. And he figured he could make some good money from Jack Root, because Jack Root was a very good fighter. And he began to manage him. But knocking on the door was a young man from Canada. His name was Sam Langford. And that was a problem for Lou Houseman. And Lou Houseman didn't want to put up Jack Root against Jim Jeffries. So he wanted to come up with a strategy that would make money for him through the eyes and the gloves of Jack Root. They decided to make a division called the light heavyweight division. But it turns out he couldn't just present the belt to Jack Root. Someone had to have a chance to fight for it. Sam Langford had knocked on the door. He was denied. So they would create a tournament, and we'll talk about that in 1903. But the participants was Marvin Hart, George Gardner, who was a hard puncher, by the way, and a man who had invented the corkscrew punch. His name was McCoy, the real McCoy, first name Charles. As I said, we'll talk about that as we get to 1903. September 7th, heavyweight Bill Squire knocks out Peter Mills in 2 rounds of Australia. And this bout was the last bare-knuckle bout under the London prize ring rules. September 15th, middleweight champion Tommy Ryan had knocked out Kid Carter in 6 rounds. They fought in Fort Earl, Ontario, Canada. October 18th, young Corbett II knocks out Joe Bernstein in 7 rounds. That contest took place at Baltimore, and he would retain his featherweight championship title. October 26th, future heavyweight Boston Jack Sharkey was born. He was known as the Boston Gob. And he would become the heavyweight champion in 1932 when he would stop Mac Smelling. December 23rd, bantamweight champion Harry Forbes would stop Frank Neal in 7 rounds. The contest took place in Oakland, California. December 26th, after having been knocked down 7 times, Battling Nelson would floor Christy Williams 42 times, finally knocking him out in 17th rounds in Hot Springs. It was a total of 49 knockdowns, and this puts me in mind of April 17th, 1909, when Sam McVeigh and Joe Jeanette were fighting for the Colored Heavyweight Championship title that was relinquished from Jack Johnson when he would become the heavyweight champion in 1908, defeating Noah Brusso, Tommy Burns. Joe Jeanette and Sam McVeigh would go down a total of 38 times. Joe Jeanette went down 27 times. McVeigh went down 11 times. The fight took place in Paris, France. It was a $6,000 purse. In my opinion, that was the greatest heavyweight championship contest in the history of boxing. And we'll talk about that more in 1909. Now, you had a fighter who was born December 25th, 1902. He was a bantamweight champion, and his name was Tom Morgan. He was from Washington. He stood 5 foot 5 inches, weighed 130 pounds, and he won a title when he defeated Mike Ballerino, Philadelphia. On a technical knockout in 10 rounds, the contest took place in Los Angeles, California. Now, I don't want to talk too much about Todd Morgan, Mike Ballerino. But he also had a title shot with Cannonball Martin, and we'll talk about that when we get to the 1920s. He fought former junior lightweight champion Joe Click. You see, it was during this time when fights were fights and money was to be made. And fighters fought with a different purpose in mind. The rewards were different in value. And that's why you had so many fights during that time, and boxing was still illegal in most states. I'll give you an example. January 14th, 1903, young Corbett II knocks out Austin Rice in 18 rounds in Hot Springs, New York. He defends his title weighing 130 pounds. Now, young Corbett II was born October 4th, 1880, and he fought from 1896 to 1910. He stood 5 foot 2.5 inches as featherweight. He had a career total bouts of 90 fights, 59 wins, 13 losses, 48 knockouts, and he was stopped 10 times with 12 draws. Now, young Corbett II, in fact, I'll show you some photos as this series goes on with young Corbett I, young Corbett II, young Corbett III. Young Corbett III was the southpaw who lost in 1 round against Jimmy McLaurin. He was knocked out. Jimmy McLaurin became the welterweight champion when he knocked out young Corbett III. We'll talk about all that as the series goes by. February 5th, 1903, the colored heavyweight champion, Denver Ed Martin, would lose his title to the Galveston Giant, Jack Johnson, who was known as Little Arthur. Lost him in 20 rounds. Martin went down 4 times, and the referee was Harry Stewart. They fought at the Hazard Pavilion in Los Angeles, California. February 26th, young Corbett II draws with Eddie Hopling. In defense of his featherweight championship title in San Francisco, California, Corbett wins in 20 rounds. February 27th, colored world heavyweight champion Jack Johnson, who would defeat, by the way, Denver Ed Martin, defends his title against future colored heavyweight champion Sam McVeigh. Now, Jack Johnson was outweighed 25 pounds when he was in the ring with Sam McVeigh. Sam McVeigh was an outstanding fighter. He was the Mike Tyson of his day. The contest took place at the Hazard Pavilion in Los Angeles, California. March 21st, young Corbett II knocks out former featherweight champion Terry McGovern, and that was a hell of a fight. Stopped him in 11 rounds in San Francisco, California. Just one quick note. I am reciting all these fights at the top of my head. If I stumble, please forgive me. But I'm just remembering the dates of the fights that took place, and I'm trying to remember them in chronicle order. April 22nd, former middleweight champion. Well, actually, he was a former middleweight fighter. His name was Jack Root. And he took on Charles Kid McCoy. That's the fight that I told you about when they started a tournament, when they created the light heavyweight division. Lou Hausman was part of that decision. And Charles Kid McCoy had a famous punch called the corkscrew punch. 10-round decision was won by Jack Root. And he would be the first to claim the light heavyweight championship title as a claimant. May 13th, middleweight George Gardner stops future heavyweight champion Marvin Hart in 12 rounds. And he would claim the light heavyweight championship title. So now they had to unify, if you will, the claimants to decide who would become the champion. Knocks on the door is Sam Langford. He is denied. So on July 4th, Saturday to be exact, light heavyweight claimants, both of them, George Gardner and Jack Root, would mix it up. And George Gardner would knock out Jack Root in 12 rounds. It was scheduled for 20. The referee Eddie McBride would stop the contest 2 minutes and 20 seconds of that 12th round. He awarded the first light heavyweight championship belt to George Gardner. Now, Gardner stood 5'11.5 inches. He had a 77.5 inch reach, had a record of 43 wins, 11 losses, 31 knockouts, and he was stopped 6 times. He had 66 total bouts. He was from Ireland. He fought from 1897 to 1910. The bout took place at the International Athletic Club in Fort Earn, Canada. August 13th, bantamweight champion Frank Neal knocks out Harry Forbes in 2 rounds. Forbes goes down 3 times and then is counted out. Referee Eddie Garrett. And the bout took place at the Mechanics Pavilion in San Francisco, California. Eddie Garrett was a replacement referee for that bout. Now, on August 14th, 1903, James A. Jeffries knocks out James J. Corbett in 10 rounds in San Francisco, California, and James A. Jeffries would retain his heavyweight championship title. Don't forget, James J. Jeffries had knocked out Bob Fitzsimmons for that title. September 3rd, Abe Attell becomes the new featherweight champion when he would defeat Johnny Reagan. Now, this was for the vacant title, and we'll learn more about why that title became vacant as this series goes on. They fought at the Western Athletic Club in St. Louis, Missouri. October 16th, bantamweight champion Frank Neal draws with Johnny Reagan in 20 rounds and retains his championship title. The referee was Charlie Eiton. He makes the decision. The contest took place at the Hazard Pavilion in Los Angeles, California. Just want to make sure that was the right arena. That was the same arena that Jack Johnson would fight. I believe that's the arena he fought with Denver Ed Martin. I know that's the arena he fought with Sam McVeigh. October 27th, Jack Johnson defends his colored heavyweight championship title in 20 rounds against the colored heavyweight champion, or a future colored heavyweight champion, Sam McVeigh. And he dropped McVeigh in round 1 and round 6, and Johnson would tag twice in round 7. They almost stopped the contest because that was a strong right hand. Sam McVeigh could punch. He was a hell of a puncher. Tuesday, October 27th, bantamweight champion Young Corbett II knocks out Hugh Murphy with a vicious body blow in the 11th round. That contest took place in Boston, Massachusetts. Both men were 23 years of age in that contest. November 25th, light heavyweight George Gardner. He was a champion at that time. And he lost a 20-round decision to a middleweight champion, Bob Fitzsimmons, and became a 2-division world lineal champion. He became a world middleweight champion with a victory over non-Perel Jack Dempsey at the Athletic Club in New Orleans, January 14th, 1891. I'm speaking of Bob Fitzsimmons. And Bob Fitzsimmons, in my opinion, is very underrated as a fighter. Slim legs, wide shoulders, but he could punch. He was a blacksmith. He sparred many rounds with the king of the Battle Royale. His name was Bob Armstrong. Bob Armstrong would pick up the vacant title when Peter the Great, Peter Jackson, would retire. And he would fight a man by the name of Strong, who was very, very strong, by the way, but that was his name. December 8th, future colored middleweight champion, Mexican, European, and Australian heavyweight champion, Sam Langford, defeats world lightweight champion, Old Master Joe Gans in 15 rounds for a non-title fight in Boston, Massachusetts. Now, Gans had traveled 300 miles from Philadelphia to Boston. He had just defeated Dave Holly of Philadelphia. And the very next day, he had to report to Boston, Massachusetts to take on the Boston strongman, in my opinion. Boston Bone Crusher, Sam Langford. Now, when Gans took on Dave Holly, that was some fight. December 6th, but on December 7th of 1903, 6 rounds, he would take on Dave Holly and had to travel the following day to meet with Sam Langford, December 8th. December 29th, featherweight champion Young Corbett II knocks out Eddie Hoagland, 16 rounds, San Francisco, California, in defense of his crown. February 1st, 1904, Abe Patel knocks out Harry Forbes in 5 rounds in defense of his new featherweight championship crown that was scheduled for 20. Abe Patel was known as Little Hebrew. He was a mob active fighter, if you will. Al Capone did a lot of business with Jack Kearns and many other managers during that time, and Abe Patel was the pawn for Al Capone. February 29th, Young Corbett II knocks out Dave Sullivan in 11 rounds in San Francisco, California, and he would retain his featherweight championship crown. March 25th, Jimmy Britt defeats Young Corbett II, 20 rounds in San Francisco, California, and he would defend his title. But on April 30th, world welterweight champion, Barbados Demon, Joe Walcott, who was 29 years of age at that time, was scheduled to defend his title against Dixie Kid. Here was the problem. Walcott came into the ring weighing 2.5 pounds overweight. He was 149.5 pounds or so. And the bout was scheduled for 20 rounds. Dixie Kid never complained. And the referee, his name was Dick O'Sullivan, took a look at a few punches that were borderline, but no complaints were made. Joe Walcott, at the end of the fight, the 20th round, expected his hands to be raised, but Dixie Kid's hand was raised because Dixie Kid had lost the fight. But Dick O'Sullivan thought that Joe Walcott was going to follow instructions by taking a dive, and they never did. So the referee, Dick O'Sullivan, would raise the hand of Dixie Kid. How he did that was he disqualified Joe Walcott for low blows. He waited to the end of the 20th round, the final round of that contest, to decide to disqualify Joe Walcott. After an investigation was made, it was said that Dick O'Sullivan placed a wager on Dixie Kid. And so Dixie Kid would be the champion until that investigation was completed. Joe Walcott had to take on a fighter by the name of Mysterious Billy Smith in order to get his title back. So the belt was returned back to Walcott between February 26th and September 30th. Walcott has 6 fights. He fought Black Bill. He fought Dixie Kid. He took on Sandy Ferguson, young Peter Jackson. I'm trying to remember. Mike Donovan, Larry Temple. He fought Sam Langford. That was in 1904. He drew with Dave Holly. And he was in a ring with Joe Gans. In 1904 alone. June 1st, Young Gardner KOs Charlie Goldman in the 42nd round. Tell you about Charlie Goldman. That was his professional debut in New York, and Charlie Goldman would become a matchmaker when he had an office in Stillman's Gym in 8th Avenue. Goldman would wind up being a matchmaker for Rocky Marciano, and he would wind up becoming his manager. In 1952, Rocky Marciano would knock out Jersey Joe Walcott in the 13th round. But he would upset Joe Louis in 1951, New York's Madison Square Garden in 8 rounds. But Charlie Goldman would become Rocky Marciano's manager. But he would fight June 1st, 1904. July 29th, lightweight champion Barry Nelson knocks out Eddie Harmon, 19 rounds in San Francisco, California. August 26th, world heavyweight champion James A. Jeffries knocks out Jack Monroe. 2 rounds, San Francisco, California. September 5th, featherweight champion Barry Nelson and Julio Herrera go 20 rounds in Montreal, Canada. Now, September 5th of 1904, Sam Langford faces the Barbados Demon Joe Walcott. And here's what's interesting about this contest. The referee was Owen Kennedy. The bout went 15 rounds. It was called a draw. It was a prearranged draw. Langford would have to knock out Walcott. Walcott was such a hard puncher at welterweight. Jack Johnson would be stopped in 3 rounds by a Jewish heavyweight. His name was Joe Chowinski. Walcott, a year later, would knock out Joe Chowinski. Chowinski knocked out Jack Johnson in 3 rounds. They would go to prison after they were caught fighting because it was illegal. And Chowinski would teach Jack Johnson some foot movement, tricks of the trade. Walcott would knock out Chowinski. You're talking about incredible stories. September 30th, lightweight champion Joe Gans fights world welterweight champion Barbados Demon Joe Walcott, becomes the 20-round draw. Joe Walcott breaks his elbow and goes the distance to retain his championship title. October 13th, Brooklyn's Tommy Sullivan knocks out featherweight Abe Patel in 5 rounds in St. Louis, Missouri. He would win the World Featherweight Championship title. Sullivan does not fight in 1905 at all. And there were opportunities for him to fight, but he chose not to. So in 1906, his title was declared vacant. October 17th, Joe Bauer defeats Frankie Neal in 20 rounds in London and won the Bantamweight Championship title. On October 18th, the colored world heavyweight champion Jack Johnson knocks out Denver Ed Martin in 2 rounds. That was a return match because both men would mix it up in 1903. October 31st, a lightweight champion Baltimore Old Master Joe Gans defeats Jimmy Britt after the referee would rule the bout a foul. Here's the problem. He ruled it a foul in the middle of the 5th round. The bout took place in San Francisco, California, and he retained his World Lightweight Championship title. 1 month later, Joe Gans would give up that title, stating he could not make the weight. Why did he say that? Because Joe Gans was going to be killed, assassinated. He was supposed to throw the fight. And he didn't throw the fight. The referee was supposed to disqualify Jimmy Britt earlier, and he didn't. Joe Gans would suffer so many low blows and damage his family jewels that he said, I'm not dealing with this again. 1904, Olympic boxing was added to the games. On November 29th, Barry Nelson stops young Corbett II in 10 rounds in San Francisco, California. December 20th, November 30th, 1904, Joe Gans outgrows the division and vacates the title, and Jimmy Britt defeats Barry Nelson in 20 rounds, becomes the new lightweight champion, and you tell me that boxing is not corrupt. January 31st, 1905, and we'll stop in 1905, and we'll pick up in another video. Frankie Neal stops fighting Dick Hyland in 15 rounds in San Francisco, California. February 28th, Barry Nelson stops young Corbett II. March 28th, 1905, Marvin Hart is given a decision over Jack Johnson in 20 rounds And the verdict was by referee Attic Griffithson. It took place at the Woodworks Pavilion in San Francisco, California. Now, Jack Johnson was 26 years old. He stood 6'1" and had a 74-inch reach. And Marvin Hart was 28 years old. He stood 5'11" and had a 74-inch reach. May 2nd, James A. Jeffries concedes that he's going to retire while he was performing on the stage as Davy Crockett. May 19th, World Heavyweight Champion James A. Jeffries officially announces his retirement. He was 2-1 odds in the 8th round when he knocked out Barford Simmons, July 25th, 1902, Coney Island in Brooklyn, New York. And July 3rd, heavyweight champion retires. And he appoints no one. But Marvin Hart decided to make the claimant that he was the heavyweight champion. And when he was asked by reporters, were you given that opportunity by Jeffries because you earned it? He said yes. And when Jeffries was asked about Marvin Hart, he didn't know who Marvin Hart was. I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. We will continue in the next video the complete history of boxing. Thanks for listening. Peace.